generally, when we talk about political prisoners, we're talking about people who are incarcerated, because of their political beliefs and also because of their political activity, the sort of things they were engaged in the course of struggle. And even more specific than that, oftentimes when we say political prisoners, we mean people who were incarcerated during the period of the 60s and 70s, which of course was a very active period here in the United States with the radical movement. You had groups, of course, like the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, which is an armed underground formation, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots Organization, the American Indian Movement, the list goes on in terms of those groups. And so the American government, in an attempt to squash these movements and in an attempt to render the movement impotent and to take away some of its greatest leaders, oftentimes would railroad people into jail, if not outright assassinate them. And there are many cases where some of the folks we consider political prisoners quite literally didn't do anything. We look at folks like Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier, and these are people who have been behind bars for years and years and years, who literally are not guilty for the things that they were accused of. And we know that this phenomenon in the United States didn't start, in the 60s and 70s, but the FBI, before it was the FBI and it was just the Bureau of Investigations, J. Edgar Hoover, an arch racist, he cut his teeth targeting Marcus Garvey from the United Negro Improvement Association, railroaded him into jail on a trumped-up charge, which made him a political prisoner, and eventually had him deported because he didn't want Garvey to die in jail and become a martyr to the movement. And so, you fast forward to the year 2018, and we're caught up in the movement for Black Lives, and we have people like Joshua Williams, who was a Ferguson frontline resistor, who was sentenced to 8 years in jail. He's in jail right now for setting a fire within a Quick Trip gas station that was quickly extinguished. So it's 100% clear that he was being made an example of by the court. And even outside of the movement for Black Lives, I'm also thinking of Red Fawn Fallis, who was an important figure in the Dakota Access Pipeline struggle, the water protector. And there was a federal informant that actually entered a romantic relationship with her, and she was set up on a gun charge for which she is now serving, I believe, a 5-year sentence, maybe 2 to 5 years if memory serves. So we see that this trend of the American government trying to squash movements and trying to repress people and organizations who are attempting to stand against the status quo, who want a more equitable world, who want a more equal and truly democratic society. This is still ongoing, and that is the connection to Black August, which was put in place by prisoners, and largely is to be in contact with political prisoners, along with the fasting, the study, the recommitment to struggle. It's so important to make all those connections, because this is what basically it helps anchor us in what we must do to make sure that the struggle carries forward. We pick up the baton from the folks of all the years past, the 60s, the 70s, that radical movement, the anti-apartheid movement in the 80s, all the righteous movements throughout the history of this country and indeed throughout the world. We have a duty to live up to those movements, to try to take the best from them and learn from their mistakes so that we can make strides in the movement in our time.
And what about prisoners who are not political? I mean, I feel like...
Right, yeah, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, and see, that's the interesting thing about it, because it could be argued that just because you're not sort of in the streets, pumping your fist, demonstrating, that doesn't mean that if you're incarcerated, you're not a political prisoner, because if you're a petty thief, a drug dealer, whatever sort of illegal activity you may be caught up in, it's, particularly if you're from a poor working or oppressed community, there are politics that surround them. Because let's say a brother gets busted with some dope in his pocket, okay? Well, we have to ask, why why are the regulations around that drug are what they are? Why does it seem that crimes that typically affect poor and working folks more often than not seem to have the harsher sentences? Why is the criminal legal system set up in such a way that folks with the most resources can receive justice and have a much higher chance of going free than people who don't have resources, who don't have access to the quality lawyers, who are stuck with public defenders who are overloaded and overworked, even if they have good intentions, and we know some of them don't, but even the good ones aren't able to do what they want to do because the way that the deck is stacked against both them and their clients. So it could be argued that really all prisoners are political prisoners, because in the United States houses 25% of all incarcerated people on planet Earth, even though we're only about 5% of the global population. I believe the number is somewhere around 2.8 million people in terms of people that are behind bars. But if we want to add in people who are on parole, on probation, we're talking about 7 million people. And this is the so-called land of the free. And so this is why we say that even if incarcerated people aren't activists, if they're not radicals, if they're not organizers, they're still political prisoners, because the fact that their incarceration was informed by this vicious, racist, oppressive system that we have in the United States.